Hello and welcome to the next episode of Empathy at the Table. I'm your host, Tony Anagor, and today we're joined by Keld Jensen. Keld is one of the top practitioners of negotiation in the world. In fact, he was listed number 4 in the list of negotiation gurus. He has been in the world of negotiation since 1998. He's a practitioner, he's an academic, and a teacher. I'm looking forward to this conversation with Keld. He has a real holistic approach to the way we negotiate. So he doesn't just give us tools and strategies on how to become better negotiators. He works on what we have in the back of our minds. What's the mindset of a real negotiator? One of his key terms is negotiation is about creating value and then just dividing value amongst each of the counterparts. So this is going to be a fun conversation. I look forward to it. Join me on Empathy at the Table. Afternoon, good evening, Keld Jensen. How are you today?
I am good. How are you, Tony?
Very well, very well. You know, I've been following you you came on my radar, I think probably about a year and a half ago. And literally you just exploded into my LinkedIn profile, all of my feeds. And I've just been an avid follower of yours since then. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I guess I want to kick off by asking you, in your LinkedIn profile, you say that you're a researcher, you're a practitioner, you're a teacher. How do you combine all three of those as a negotiator?
I think that's a great question. With my answer, first and foremost, would be I have to. I couldn't do one without the other. So I think my personality just requires that I have to do research in order to develop solutions for my client. And then I both have an extrovert and an introvert side. So that means that I need to be out on stage and delivering keynotes and working with clients and students at university. But at the same time, I also once in a while need quiet time. So that perfectly fits in with me writing based on research. And I would say the writing part for me is also developing and make me learn. So in order to write, you have to study and research. So when I'm releasing a book, that is a result of month and years of preparing and studying and writing. So to me, it's really a learning process as well. So for me, I guess it's very different from one individual to another, but for me, it's like a perfect triangle.
So do you actually get to, you test out your hypotheses in the real world, go back, tweak them, and then when you're finally confident that this is actually what works, that then goes into the book and into your teachings?
Exactly. I have the privilege of being a professor at 4 different universities. So even before going out in the real world, I can test it on students. So, will that approach work? Will that question work? Will that mathematical model work? And then, when we've proven it works, and typically write some kind of research paper on it, then, we tend to put it into one of my books and then dump it on our clients as well.
Yeah, you said one of your books. I think I read somewhere, is it 38 books you've written?
No, far from it. I am published in 38 countries, but doing my 26th book is the one coming out in August, the 103 Elements on Wiley this year.
26 books in 38 countries.
Yes.
Wow. So when did you start? What was the first book?
1998. A book called Negotiation that was published in Scandinavia. It never made it outside Scandinavia, but it was my first attempt to write a book on negotiation. And the fun part, Tony, is that I was rereading this book just 1 or 2 years ago. And I was embarrassed. I thought it was terrible. And a lot of the conclusions in the book I disagreed with when I was reading it now. But I don't think it was that bad in 1998. It was praised a lot and did really well. But what actually occurred to me is that negotiation is a moving target. So in 1998, if we think back, internet wasn't that big a thing. Virtual conferences wasn't that big a thing, if it at all existed. you wouldn't really have the whole technology and virtual side of negotiation. So you would predominantly still be meeting face to face. And recent studies we did together with World Commerce and Contracting, Tony, actually identified that 70% of all negotiations today are predominantly or completely conducted virtually without people meeting face to face, which
Wow.
actually honestly shocked me a bit, being a big fan of face to face meetings. So anyway, back to my point. So negotiation as a science have changed a lot, I realized, since 1998.
Hmm. Let's talk more about you, because this podcast is all about how we bring ourselves to a negotiation. And I think I read somewhere you said that what was it, we negotiate 8 to 10,000 times a day. I mean, that's like 20 to 30 times a day.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
at what point did you realize that, this is something that you really need to get your teeth into and bring something of value to the world?
Well, up until 1998, I was in the tech industry, and I have been in sales and marketing, and ended my career in the tech industry as a CEO of a public company in Stockholm, in Sweden.
Hmm.
And the fun part is, Tony, that I was actually unconsciously incompetent in the science of negotiation,
Mm.
as a lot of executives are, by the way. And my former partner, who's unfortunately is not among us anymore, came to me, and in less than 2 hours, he moved me from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent, which is a terrible wake up call, because suddenly you realize that you are not good at something you thought you were good at.
Mm.
And that made me realize that negotiation is such an important part of every human's life. And yet, many people have never had any formal training in it. So I was heading this big company and had never received any formal training in negotiation. Had basically no idea on how to do it correctly, didn't know what I was doing right, and didn't know what I was doing wrong. So, short version, I left the tech industry and moved straight into consultancy, advisory, and training in negotiation, and has been living and breathing negotiation ever since, because it is such a tremendously important skill set for all of us.
Mm.
There was just a study released a few days ago here in the US, published in Forbes magazine, that was listing the most important skill for top 25 bracket income groups in the US. And once again, no surprise to me, really, negotiation was absolutely on the top as number two.
Mm.
So it was the second most important skill for everybody working in top 25 income bracket. And it just, again, it just supports every study we're seeing from everywhere. World Economic Forum, Baines and Company, McKinsey and Company, Stanford, Harvard University, you name it. Negotiation is among the top 10 most important
Mm.
skills for everybody, regardless of your job.
I think that the challenge, certainly I come across this, is in people's individual definition of what negotiation is, because there's so many different strands of negotiation. I know in your work you differentiate between a commercial negotiation and hostage negotiation, for example.
Mm,
So
right.
before we go into your definition, I'd
Mm,
like to kind of see whether, have you come across any specific real kind of reasons that people have a bias against negotiation. You mentioned negotiation, and people tend to either put you in a category
mm.
and not really want to go into a conversation. What's your take on that?
Well, one thing I find is that actually a surprising big number that I meet of people, professionals, dislike to negotiate. And quite often, Tony, the reason they dislike to negotiate is because they perceive negotiation as being confrontational. They
Hmm.
perceive negotiation as being a bad experience where you're meeting people that will argue against you, that will be combative, that will be confrontational. So they shy away from negotiation because they feel it's an uncomfortable environment. What I'm claiming is that we actually have to revisit what negotiation is and isn't. Because back to what you said, I am a commercial negotiator. Don't call me if there's a hostage thing going on. I wouldn't know what to do. Because again, back to what we might be talking about in a minute or so, is that hostage negotiation, commercial negotiation, to me, is two completely different things.
Hmm.
So I meet a lot of people who may not understand what negotiation could be and should be, and really see negotiation as a pure zero sum positional game. And it has been since 1776, to be specific. And the reason I'm saying 1776 is because that was when the book The Wealth of Nation by Adam Smith was published, that basically described how nations should trade with each other and how businesses should trade with each other. And as those of us who read the book knows, that Adam Smith said that everybody should do what's best for themselves, right? So that's,
Hmm.
preaching pure ecocentric behavior in any transaction. And I'm quite opposite that. I believe that not only from a human point of view, but also from a financial point of view, it makes a lot more sense if we actually are doing what is good for ourselves and the group at the same time. So I
Hmm.
have an interest in helping you become financially more successful, because I will become financially more successful by doing that.
That makes perfect sense. Let's go back to how this person moved you from unconsciously incompetent to consciously competent in 2 hours. What? Take us back to that moment. What happened?
Very simply, he was invited in as an advisor for the tech company, and he's just started asking questions. So, what's the framework for your negotiation? Have you got a
Hmm.
checklist on how you want to negotiate? What questions are we going to ask the counterpart? What is your typical preparation? How do you perceive yourself as a negotiation style? Are you combative, collaborative, stalling, whatever you? Just a bunch of questions, and I
Wow.
couldn't answer any of them. I was just sitting there, Tony, going,
Yeah, yeah, that'll do it. I think just two of those questions, I think, are enough, right? Um, I mean, I love the world of negotiation. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy negotiating, but for me, a negotiation is it is a creative pursuit, right? It's a creative conversation with people. Um, but I also find that sometimes ego plays a huge part in negotiation. And
Yes.
and so when you are teaching negotiation, you're in negotiation. How do you approach the role that the ego plays in a negotiation?
Well, we have an example, really, especially when I'm working with executive. The higher level, the better. Where we ask them to, let's say we have 80 people in a room. We ask the 80 people to divide themselves into groups of 10 groups of eight.
Hmm.
Then they have to do that on their own. Then we ask them to pick one leader in their own group. So they have to negotiate that.
Hmm.
And when they're done with that, then they have to pick one leader in the group to negotiate with the nine other groups to pick one leader in the room.
Hmm.
And they have 3 hours to do this exercise. And most of the time they fail. They never manage to reach to pick one leader in the room because the ego is in the way. Everybody believes that they are the right leader and nobody else should do that. The fun part is, Tony, this only happens when you are at C-suite level. The higher ranking, the more unsuccessful they become. If you are at a lower level, engineering or accounting or legal or what have you, quite often people are done in 10, 15, 20 minutes because the ego isn't that present.
Hmm.
So you are spot on. Ego is a huge thing. And what I typically say as well is that we have to remember that all business is human, right? What I mean by that is negotiation has never happened between two companies. It happened between Tony and Keld. That was what happened.
Hmm.
And if Tony and Keld likes each other and appreciate each other and trust each other, we will potentially be very successful. But if we don't like each other, don't trust each other, and don't really want to work together, perhaps we walk away and there will be no deal. And
Hmm.
we will find very rational facts to describe why we couldn't reach a deal, right? The economics couldn't work, delivery time was not really there, but in reality, it's down to there wasn't trust or there wasn't any relationship. I am advising a large number of European governments as well, and they have to obey the EU regulations that you go out with a tender and you cannot negotiate in most cases. But what is funny, I'm not going to mention any names, but more often than not, I've been sitting on the side of the buyer, so that means the governmental institution, and I might be sitting with three, four, five people, and we have had three, four, five meetings with potential suppliers that have been presenting their proposal, right? And I
Hmm.
can tell you, Tony, what happens every single time is that the group of buyers from the governmental institution when the last supplier has left, they all agree that we like supplier B the most. Now, supplier B is not the financially most competitive and product-wise most competitive, but he or she is the one we like the most. So how can we make that one win? That is happening every single time. And it's not a surprise to me, because you and I as human beings are irrational, and we prefer to do business with somebody we like.
Yeah.
Daniel Kahneman, the American-Israeli professor that I think a lot of your listeners know, he's the father of behavioral economics. He's been stating in his Nobel Prize-winning report that, we prefer to do business with somebody we like, even though they have a worse product at a higher price. And I believe that every single day. We are not just aware of it. So yeah. Sorry, that was a long answer to your question, Tony.
No. I mean, you're dropping pearls of wisdom every step you're taking. So, I mean, I agree 100% with this. But knowing this, it sounds totally intuitive that, I only do business with somebody I like. A deal could look great on paper, but if I don't like you, the deal won't get done. Why is negotiation so difficult? What's where's the challenge in getting two people to sit down, admit that the reason they've shown up is because they care about getting a result,
Right.
and just putting things on the table? Where's the difficulty in that?
Well, the fun part is, Tony, I don't actually think it's difficult. I think human beings makes it difficult. I have a slide that I normally use to wrap up a training program, a workshop, or whatever. And quick summary: the slides basically says that the requirement to be successful in any collaboration is openness, transparency, trust, likability on one level. And on the other level, it's required that you have knowledge, you have authority to conclude a deal, you have the experience, blah, 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 whatnot. So and then it's broken down in some modules. And then I always ask my audience, how many of you agree with the content of this slide, that if you fulfill these areas, you're going to be more successful, you'll be reducing risk and liabilities and improving profit. And everybody agrees. Every single one, regardless whether I'm in Johannesburg, I'm in London, in Frankfurt, in Los Angeles, in New York, wherever it might be, everybody agrees. Yes, exactly. That is what I want. I want transparency and openness and honesty and all that. And then I'm always telling them, just to tease a little bit, that, the fun part is that when you go out and ask your counterpart the same question, they all go, yes, exactly. That's funny you put that slide on. That is exactly what I want as well. I truly believe that negotiation, Tony, is not complicated. I truly believe that people makes it complicated. I have a lot of great colleagues out there who is really good at their stuff, training and advising on negotiation. But we have some colleagues in the industry who love to preach smoke and mirrors, as I call it. That negotiation is a game that is all about outmaneuvering the counterpart, figuring out if the counterpart is lying, have a long list of what I would call tools to manipulate the counterpart. And to me, negotiation is a very simple process. You and I meet up to create value and distribute value. And the best way to do that is actually work together as a team. So developing the value is teamwork. Distributing the value is the negotiation. So we have to understand the process. And sometimes I meet people who are saying, well, what you're preaching is actually very, very, very easy, because it's teamwork. Negotiation can't be that easy. And I'm saying, well, imagine if it is. Imagine if negotiation is actually not a war. Imagine if it's actually not uncomfortable. Imagine if we actually sit on the same side of the table to make 2 + 2 equal more than 4. Now, Tony, I'm not naive. We can't do it all the time, because, we meet people we don't like. We have competition. There could be a range of reasons why we can't do it all the time. But imagine if we could do it 50% of the time and even become financially more successful doing it. I mean, that would be remarkable, wouldn't it?
Of course. There's something I'm picking up from you, Keld, is that, so you say people make negotiations complicated, which I agree with. But at the beginning, you described yourself as an introvert and an extrovert. When somebody describes themselves in these terms, that indicates they've done some work on themselves, right? They know who they are. And so I'd like to ask you, as a negotiation trainer, how much work do you actually spend on understanding who you are, what your triggers are, how to manage your triggers, and so on and so forth, who you're bringing to the negotiation?
I would say I have spent a fair amount of time trying to figure out who
Mm,
I am and how I react. I think it's very important to understand the emotional intelligence behind you. You know, why do I react this way when I meet this type of individual?
mm,
Why do I get concession orientated when I meet um, that individual? Why do I get aggressive when I meet that individual? Why do I get offended when somebody says that? If you do a little bit of exploration into yourself, which is not easy, but if you do, you'll find some of those triggers that make you react in a certain
mm,
way. I have found myself with the risk of being combative if I end up in a negotiation that I feel is unfair. Is combative reaction the best possible solution? Absolutely not. So I'm still dealing with myself, trying to become better and sense that I'm moving down that route when I'm sitting with somebody that I feel is asking for something that I would consider unfair, for instance. So yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, again, too long an answer to your question. Yes, I have been doing some work on myself.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned, so I've got it written here, is that your approach is not just to focus on adding tools to the toolbox, but to make you a better negotiator, but also work on changing your mindset. So it's not just about the
Mhm.
practical tools that you can use, but and I really like that holistic approach to negotiation. Has it always been like that for you, or has it changed over the time that you think the more holistic approach has become more prevalent?
Wonderful question. I think it is a development. If I go back in 1998, it was more tool based.
Hmm.
It was more just focused on create the right agenda, ask the right question, read the counterpart, do your preparation right. You know, all the basics really that I would call the basics today. That have kind of matured into understanding that negotiation for first and foremost is a management strategy.
Hmm.
It have to be embraced at the top level of every organization.
Yeah.
An organization needs a negotiation strategy, just like they need a communication strategy, a go-to-market strategy, or sales and sales strategy and HR strategy, and what have you. So the holistic view, as you mentioned, is incredibly important, combined with the toolbox.
Hmm.
And we actually always start both advisory assignments and training courses by saying this is not so much a training course in negotiation that will equip you with tools, but more a changed mindset on how to negotiate.
Hmm. I like
And
that. I like.
without any exception, Tony, people are leaving our training course with a very different view of negotiation compared to when they entered the training course. Because negotiation training today, people have a perception that I will arrive and then I will spend 2, 3 days on getting a number of tools on how I can win negotiation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's all nice and dandy, but sometimes it's a little bit more pop culture than it's really effective, right?
Yeah.
And that's why we see some authors out there that are very successful preaching something that sounds cool and they have a great fun background and people are excited about it. But sometimes I question how much of that is actually really compatible with the world of commercial negotiation. And I have to emphasize my expertise is commercial negotiation. Back to
Yeah.
what I said earlier, if you call me for a lot of other negotiation, I might struggle. I'm
Yeah.
struggling with my kids every day, negotiating with them. You know,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. I actually had on the podcast, I had a hostage negotiator, somebody who he wore with him like a key ring. And at any point in time, he could get a call and he would have to fly to Nicaragua or fly somewhere else to literally get involved in a hostage negotiation. And he teaches business negotiation. And he says, a lot of the stuff that you read or you see on TV or you hear would not work.
yeah,
Um, it's all sensationalized. That if you used any of these tactics or techniques in a real live negotiation, if it was a hostage one, you'd be dead before you got the second word out in real life. I mean, and this is someone who does it for a living. So I
Sure.
definitely agree with you that
Yeah.
there are platforms that have sensationalized
Yeah.
some parts of negotiation. And in some ways it's good because it's brought negotiation back onto the back into the forefront. But in some ways, you get people showing up thinking, right, you're going to make me a better salesperson. You're going to make me better at manipulating other people. Do you find that?
Oh, absolutely. I unfortunately, some people take their negotiation training from a Hollywood movie,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that is
yeah,
not always useful.
yeah. Keld, you also said, and this was a shocking statistic for me, 42% of
Mhm.
value gets left on the table. All right, so
Yes.
I've got a double question. Firstly, how did you research that and quantify that? And secondly, what can we do to change that narrative?
Yes. This is one of my core areas. It is so important to understand that every single day, as you and I are sitting here talking, negotiators are agreeing on stuff and disagreeing on stuff, but agreeing on stuff, signing a contract and leaving the conference room, not knowing that they left value on the table. They don't
Hmm.
identify, they don't realize it, they don't utilize it. And the great part, Tony, is it's really not rocket science. The 42% is a value that we have discovered through research of 35,000 negotiations globally since 1998. And what we did was we looked at a negotiation, the variable being negotiated, and then we looked at the asymmetric value between the two parties. The asymmetric value is the difference between my cost and your value, or my value and your cost.
Hmm.
Example, delivery time. If I'm a buyer and I require that you should deliver in 3 weeks, typically the two parties are not disclosing their cost and benefit of the delivery time, right? So I may be going out to the market with a tender saying, Tony, I want delivery time in 3 weeks. You're not challenging that. You're just thinking, all right, I can do that. It will cost me $100,000. Now, my benefit of getting it in 3 weeks may only be $50,000. So I'm putting a higher cost on
Hmm.
you than my benefit might be. That's the asymmetric value. If we had an open, transparent dialogue regarding the cost, and we figure that out that your cost is 100,000 and my benefit is only 50, perhaps we shouldn't do 3 weeks delivery time. Perhaps we should go to 6 weeks where you would have zero cost and my benefit would be lower, but we would then make sense if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
So, negoeconomics, as we call it, negotiation economics, is all about identifying, utilizing, and realizing that asymmetric value. And we have identified more than 370 variables that could generate negoeconomics, where there's a difference between your benefit and my costs. And it goes without saying that that value is existing in every single, that's a promise, every single commercial negotiation, because the negotiators are either not open and transparent, they are negotiating in a positional, in a very positional way. They have not developed and matured the variables. That's another thing.
Hmm.
Many commercial negotiations have not expanding the real number of variables that are negotiable. Typically, they are negotiating 6, 7, 8, 9 commercial variables. In reality, you might have 30. We were just doing an assignment with a big construction company in Europe. They were negotiating on less than 7 commercial variables. We did a brainstorming session with them where they themselves were sitting and thinking out of the box. They ended up at 130 and qualified 30 of those 130 to start negotiating on, and doubled their earnings just by doing that. I repeat, doubled their earnings. So there is so much value out there, and it's actually great news, because every single organization on earth have the opportunity of improving their bottom line simply by looking into asymmetric values.
What I love about what you're saying is, I mean, I've researched you and this has been backed up. I mean, I've seen clients of yours who have actually put a numeric value. I think there's one chap said he saved, or no, yeah, he was able to take an extra $500,000 worth of value off the table just from what you taught him. So, I know your stuff works, and you're one of those practitioners that walk your talk. So you were voted the fourth top negotiator in the world. You took some scalps. I mean, you were ahead of Robert Urey, the Godfather. You were ahead of Deepak Malhotra. What did you do? What is it that Keld does that makes him one of? And I think you were just below, like Brian Tracy. I mean, that's fantastic. What have you done? What's the body of work that has put you in that position, such a lofty position?
Well, first and foremost, I'm very humbled by that position, and I would even argue if that's fair when you compare it to giants like Dr. Dan Shapiro from Harvard and Urey and people like that. I think I think that if I should take a little bit of a holistic view, I think that we sometimes do not recognize the real giants in the world of negotiation. And sometimes, just like like in other parts of life, we have a tendency to celebrate those who do something that is easy to understand. And sometimes when we look at the real giants, it may be hard to understand what Dr. Dan Shapiro or William Urey is doing for the general audience, and a lot of the other really great gurus that is on that list. And I think some of them deserves more recognition that they're actually getting. That's one side of my story. I'm obviously very humbled and honored that I am ranked on the list. And I would say that I'm very sincere and believe in what I'm doing. And as I said earlier, Tony, I breathe and dream about negotiation. It is a mission to me. It's not a job, it's a mission, because I feel, I've experienced that we can improve and develop human beings to do so much better. And I mean, if you look around the world right now, we're not doing that well in general. Crisis and conflicts everywhere. And part of that reason is that we need to get better at negotiations. One of my new favorite topics, Tony, is actually women and negotiations, because we have seen through studies that women, I'm generalizing, approach negotiation differently than men. I'm generalizing. They're less combative and more collaborative. The ego is not as big and the empathy is higher. And, when I see a picture from an international negotiation, there was one recently with Ukraine on one side and EU on the other side. It was a bunch of middle-aged white men on both sides of the table. And it was impossible to find a woman in the room out of perhaps 15, 16, 17 men. And I think we have to stop for a second and realize there's something wrong, because I've been doing this for many years, and I can see every single time we have mixed genders, women and men, to an equal number in a team, they outperform teams that are completely or predominantly men. I don't even know why I got into this chapter here right now, but it's just really important that we understand how important negotiation is and how much better we can do it. And I think that's what makes me tick and get up every morning.
That's fantastic. When I was looking, at your profile and doing the research, I thought to myself, this guy could have been a politician. He could have been a rocket scientist, but he chose to be a negotiation trainer. And now I get why, right? Now I get it. You're very genuine. You really are committed to your trade, and you're really looking to add value to the world. Tell us, what is it that you're working on right now? What's the big thing, and how can people find you?
Yes, I am just wrapping up the script for my new book that is coming out in August, 103 Elements on Negotiation. That is, I'm very excited about it, because it is basically 103 chapters. It sounds like a lot, but obviously they are very sized, but 103 tools and chapters that is supported by videos online, where we have tried to isolate 103 elements that is essential for you to succeed as a negotiator. And some of your listeners might be sitting there now, Tony, and thinking, why 103? Why not 105, 101? Well, it could have been 105, 101. We just ended up at 103. Um, so that work has been really exciting. I'm looking forward to that book because it's going to be a very easy book to read because you basically just go in and say, what I need to know right now is how do I deal with that type of negotiator? How do I plan for this negotiation? And then you go to that specific chapter and read that. So you don't even have to read the book from page 1 to page whatever 300. So that is taking a lot of time right now. The other thing I'm working on is finishing my doctorate on negotiation and trust. We have done a huge international study on trust and negotiation,
Mm-hmm.
where we have been trying to capitalize the value of trust, which we have. So we can actually put a price tag on trust in negotiations, saying lack of trust will cost you, generating trust will give you a benefit. We've also, for instance, been able to identify that negotiation with a high level of trust is done remarkably in shorter time than negotiation without trust. So that's another of my angles we haven't had time to talk about today, but trust is really essential. If you want to follow me, I have 2 web pages. I have smartnership.org, which is the organization's website. I have my own website, which is keldjensen.com. Then you can go to YouTube. There's a bunch of free videos out there. And basically, if you just Google me, there's a lot of free resources that you can get. And obviously, you can buy my books everywhere, really. Amazon, I guess, is the big thing, but anywhere, really.
Well, I can thoroughly recommend to our listeners to make sure they do look out for Keld. He comes across as larger than life online, and then when you meet him kind of face to face like this, he's the real deal. I've had a pleasure speaking with you, Keld. I hope
Likewise.
you get to meet face to face. If you're ever in Spain, in any part of Spain, make sure you look me up. I'd really like. You're the type of guy I'd love to sit down and have a nice glass of wine and
Oh,
just
likewise. Oh,
negotiation.
yeah. I love having a glass of wine in Spain, Tony, for sure.
Well, you know where I am.
I know
Keld,
where
it's
you
a real pleasure. Thanks very much. And let's stay in contact.
are. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
I'd like you to join me in thanking Keld for joining us on the podcast today. What a fun, interesting conversation that was. I had so many more questions to ask him, but if you enjoyed the conversation or you want to know more, be sure to connect with Keld on his LinkedIn profile, or you can find all of his details in the show notes. And if you like this podcast and you think that there is some added value you can get for you and indeed for people around you, be sure to hit that like and follow us. Thank you for joining us for Empathy at the Table.